And welcome back to our coverage of the Mackinac Policy Conference. You know, some of the conversations that have been happening on the main stage and really out here in the parlor is about women in leadership positions. And joining me right now is Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Debbie, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
The CEO of Consumers Energy, Patti Poppe. Patti, welcome to the table. It's good to see you.
Great to be with
and
you.
And former U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuade. Barb, it's good to see you as well.
Thanks, you too.
You know, I love assembling a panel of your stature and all of you in the various positions that you hold, coming out of, I think, some of the conversations that I've had with a lot of my friends talking about Me Too, where that movement is now, and are we seeing a push for more women in leadership positions, and are we making sure that those positions are accessible to them and that they're being put in the right positions for it? And Debbie, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I'm going to be glad to hear from Patti, because I know Patti is working very hard and she has reached the boardroom and the board level. But I'm a little more pragmatic and practical than a lot of other people are, because I think it's been a wonderful 6 months of watching a breakthrough. But the fact of the matter is that Hollywood, the media, and Capitol Hill are a bubble and are not the real world. And I don't think what's happening is real until it's real for a tip waitress, a factory floor worker, a lawyer in a law firm trying to make partner. So we have to make sure that this moment of awareness continues. I think the Roseanne moment this week showed that the pressure's continuing on, but it's not real until it's real for all women.
And Patti, does it really center around, in terms of businesses and creating policies that everyone is on board with and understands what's acceptable in a workplace, what's not acceptable, but creating an atmosphere where people feel that they can succeed and women feel that they are heard?
You know, policies are part of it, and you do have to have kind of zero tolerance policies, particularly in respect to one another. But I think when we have more critical mass of women in the workplace, some of this just becomes the new expectation and the new standard. I remember early in my career, and I was in the assembly plants of General Motors in the first 15 years of my career. And over that 15 years, I watched the environment change. So I think it's as much about culture as it is about policies. You have to have the policies, but policies alone won't create the kind of culture where all people, with all sorts of differences, where diversity and inclusion actually is an imperative. It's just an expectation. That takes something, and leadership is where that starts, in addition to policies, but more importantly, just the culture and the expectation from the leaders at hand.
Barb, what do you think?
Well, I also think that the Me Too movement has been not only about sexual harassment and sexual assault, but female empowerment in general. And it's been wonderful to me to see so many women now seeking political office. And whether that's a reaction to the election of President Trump and some of the things he has said about women, or the Me Too movement, it's been wonderful to see more women getting involved in running for public office, because I think when we have women in those leadership roles, it does change the culture. And so I think it's a really exciting moment for women. It's, you know, this is not a panacea, you know, the battle's not over,
right?
But I do think it's a very positive step in the right direction.
But to your point, Debbie, though, how do you keep that momentum where people, what you would say in the real world, are feeling that kind of culture change, whether it is the waitress, whether it is that middle management, whether it is someone on the shop floor?
First of all, it takes leadership. So that Patti at her company and more women in those leadership positions are going to help to make that possible. You know, some of us watched Anita Hill and we thought, oh, a moment's here, and that moment disappeared. So all of us have to be committed to continuing to make sure that that happens. But one of the things that I think we have to understand, and Patti's correct, we have to change the culture, because for too many women, there are consequences. There are consequences of saying something. It may be economic consequences. I mean, shortly after I spoke out in November, I must have had 20 women come to me in the first 24 hours, including a woman who had been sexually assaulted by multiple men on a factory floor. And I said, we have to go do something about it. And she was like, no, you don't understand what will happen to me. My reputation will be ruined. I need this job. So we have to change the culture. So one, men can't do that and think they can get away with it. And I think the younger generation is zero tolerance. I think all of us have hundreds of stories. I think the millennials are zero tolerance, and that's going to be one of the changes that we're going to see.
You know, I think that's interesting you say that, because it's the degrees of, is it worth saying something? Is it worth, or it's like, oh, well, I'll just kind of end around and figure out how to get around this situation. Patti, talk to me a little bit about how the differences of women and more women in leadership, and when other women see that coming up, how that can maybe change their trajectory in what they see as possible in their roles and in their future careers.
Yeah, it surprised me when I was named CEO of Consumers and CMS Energy. It surprised me how many young women were so excited about that, that it was special, and that meant for them that it was possible. And I underestimated that myself. You know, I've often, in all parts of my career, been one of the very few women, and so I just had become accustomed to that. But then at Consumers, we have over 30% of my senior management team, my officers, and our board of directors are women. So I'm not alone, so it didn't feel unusual in my case that a woman would become CEO. But for women outside of my company, women around Michigan and the country, to see a woman reach that kind of achievement really does make them believe that it's possible for them too. So I do think there's timing. I do think it's an amazing time. It's a watershed era, I think, for women. And we just need to, as you said, Debbie, we can't let that fade. We just need to build on that momentum and celebrate diversity and empowering women to be all that they can be and not, self-limit.
So, Barb, you led the U.S. Attorney's Office in Southeast Michigan. I was having a conversation with Paula Kerger, who's the CEO of PBS, who was up here yesterday. And we were talking about the differences in men and women applying for jobs, and that women think that they have to check every list of the job qualifications. So if I can't check every box of what they're looking for that job, that women usually don't apply for it. But if men can check maybe one box of all the qualifications that they're looking for, they're like, I'm good for this. So what's the kind of mind shift, or the mind shift that needs to happen in terms of women seeking that kind of level of responsibility and knowing that their abilities, that they're able to get there?
Boy, I saw exactly that in the U.S. Attorney's Office. From time to time we had promotional opportunities. And so often, two flaws I think many women make is one, they wait to be asked. I was asked to run. I was asked to apply, as if it's somehow impolite to put yourself out there and say, I think I can do this job and I want to apply for it. And the other is they eliminate themselves. I always tell women, never eliminate yourself. They say, oh, well, so-and-so is probably going to get it because he's been here longer, or so-and-so is probably going to get it because he has this particular qualification background. Don't make assumptions about that. You may have other qualities that make you a wonderful candidate for this job. Even if you can't check those boxes, there may be other boxes that you do check. And so I think we need to encourage women. I think we as leaders need to tell women and encourage them to step up. Don't wait to be asked. Volunteer, raise your hand, and put yourself out there. It's risky because you might be rejected, but you got to have a little resilience about that. You may not get the first job you apply for, but keep trying because you have a skill set, you continue to build it, and you'll be qualified for these jobs.
Patti, you're nodding furiously.
I am. I'm thinking of a very specific story where I had a young woman who had the opportunity for a great assignment, and she came to me and she said, I just think I can't make it work. I said, what do you mean? Well, I have to be home on Tuesday afternoons to pick up the kids, and so I just think I have to decline. And I said, no, we can make it work. We'll make it work. She's like, no. And she just absolutely took herself out of the running. Fast forward a week later, my CIO, who's a guy, comes to me and says, hey, Patti, I'm coaching my son's baseball team. I have to be gone every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Just wanted to let you know. And I was like, of course, because he's amazing, and she was amazing, and she said no prematurely. She said no because she thought it might be a problem, as opposed to recognizing the value that she had to offer and that she could ask for what she needed, and she would have been a great addition to the team.
I want to build on that because I think one of the things is we add more women. First of all, I think women bring a perspective needed in the workplace, that we're multitaskers, we're problem solvers. We just bring a very different perspective. Yeah. But we still maintain many responsibilities. But women also work harder than men. Forgive me, the men listening to this, but the fact of the matter is we do 12, 14, 16 hours, and there needs to be flexibility. And workplaces need to build that flexibility in because they do have those responsibilities, but those responsibilities make them better and stronger people in the workforce with a different perspective.
I call myself a logistics manager. I have 3 children, and I make sure that the trains run on time and people have what they need. Let me ask you this before we leave this conversation, Debbie, in looking at the election year, and we are seeing now more women who are stepping up to run for public office, and just talking about it, something that Barb said that, oh, maybe I shouldn't run, or waiting to be asked. What are women who are candidates right now, are they coming to you asking for advice or any kind of guidance?
I'm heading the Women's Lead program and traveling the country. So I'm talking to a lot of the women and working very closely with Emily's list. there are a lot of people that have looked at what happened in the last election and are just fed up, and they want this country to go in a better direction. We have some great candidates. A lot of them are running for the first time. We need to give them the skills of how to raise money, the other tools where people are going in. And I think it's great to see them out there. There's some places where they're running into the old boys network, but some of us very tough women have the responsibility to plow through the old boys network and make sure those women are at the table, and we're working really hard to do that.
Barb, navigating that old boys network sometimes can be a tough one, especially for candidates who are maybe running for the first time.
Yeah, I found my only experiences in the U.S. Attorney's Office where I worked in a law enforcement community, which is primarily male. I found that male colleagues were actually very welcoming, very open-minded. It wasn't so much that they wanted to deliberately push me out. It just didn't occur to them to invite me to the golf outing or to other things. But once you let them know I was interested, they were more than welcoming. So I think sometimes those barriers, sometimes are very real, but sometimes are perceived. And so, again, we need to put ourselves out there. We need to maybe invite ourselves to some of these issues. And I found them to be quite welcoming when we did so.
And speaking of leadership, we're going to wrap up here. Patti, some big news for you next year at the Mackinac Policy Conference.
Yes.
Want to tell us?
So today it will be announced that the chair for next year's conference will be none other than myself. All right.
Patti,
Poppe. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well,
It's going to be exciting. This is such an amazing conference. The DPTV coverage, of course, is fantastic, and you're able to amplify the conversations that are happening here, and conversations that happen here can change the world.
Yeah.
And so it's really an amazing opportunity to be part of this conference.
and we hope to continue them once we leave the island back down in Southeast
That's
Michigan
important.
as well. Okay, Barb McQuade, Patti, Poppe, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Good being